everyone, and welcome to Inlumi's webinar on unlocking hyperautomation in finance. Firstly, a few housekeeping points. We would love to hear your questions as we go through today's session. Please feel free to use the chat function or the questions function to either say hello or ask any of us a question. My name's Charlotte Houston, and I'm a director at Inlumi. I lead our UK business, and I'm really excited to be joined by three colleagues today from Inlumi, and together we lead our intelligent automation practice in finance at Inlumi. So what we're going to talk about today is to set the context a little bit around trends in finance in automation and talk about the wider market and environmental changes that are happening. Then we'll share a case study of one of our clients who has taken a real lead in using machine learning to help with forecasting in their finance function. Then Georgia will take us through some information around hotspots for finance automation to help you identify where there might be a good opportunity for automation in finance. And then we'll talk a bit about how we start and how we can scale. And Mohan will take you through a journey of helping you understand where to start and where to scale. And finally, Stan will tell you a little bit about Inlumi's automation practice and how we might be able to help you. So, what are some of the trends in automation in finance? And perhaps if we start with really standing back and thinking about what the last couple of years have told all of us, I'm sure all of you listening to this webinar will have heard some of the statistics you can see on the screen here about the extent to which we see automation impacting the workplace, impacting jobs, how automation may take away some of the manual transactional activity that we know exists in many of the jobs we do today. But I think over the last year or two, we've seen a massive acceleration of that automation trend, particularly with the emergence of things like ChatGPT and other generative AI, which means you can start to use language to process transactions, find information, and importantly, collect together huge volumes of external data to help people in finance start to make better decisions. Some of the research that we've been doing has told us that actually the potential for intelligent automation in finance is genuinely up to 50, 60, 70% of finance jobs could change significantly with the intervention of intelligent automation. So hopefully we'll be able to colour in a little bit what that might mean for all of you today. And if we stand back, I think when I talk to many of my clients in finance functions, I think most CFOs and senior finance leaders have some perspective of some vision about what intelligent automation could mean for finance in their organizations. If we started thinking about the three things that really a finance function does in terms of performance and driving business performance and creating insight for businesses, what we're starting to see is finance leaders creating a vision of how to use predictive and machine learning to really start to piece together information to enable better scenario planning, to be able to take account of a wide range of external variables like inflation, like exchange rates, which change on a frequent basis, and be able to feed those into models to allow much better, more accurate forecasting and planning. And we'll come to talk a little bit about that in the case study that we'll share. And then in controllership, and financial controllership is really all about keeping the reins on controls within the business and managing risk. And we've seen an emergence of automation technologies which can not only automate some of the routine checks and reviews that people like internal audit have done for years, but actually start to look for smarter patterns and trends and be able to spot much earlier on issues and risks that might be emerging. And in addition, it can allow you to embed much more upfront preventative controls and checkpoints than has been possible in the past. And finally, in the heart of a finance function, the transaction processing hub within financial operations, we've seen a massive change in people planning to think about how to use not only delivery models like shared services and outsourcing, but to infuse that to a rich extent with hyper-automation, platform-based automation, and a wide range of task and process automation enabled by things like process mining. However, whilst we're seeing a lot of organizations painting a great vision, actually there's few that are really starting to move ahead quickly in this space. And what you can see on the screen is a survey that was produced by Gartner last year to start to analyze where people were in their automation journeys in finance. And what really struck me looking at this survey is the wide gap in two main areas between the leaders and the typical performers in the darker green. One area is in the forecasting capabilities that the leaders are adopting, particularly in things like cash flow forecasting or expense forecasting or customer payment forecasting. And we've seen some of the clients that we're working with really successfully start to use that to predict when a customer might pay, for example. So you can save a huge amount of time in your accounts receivable function by focusing energy on the clients who normally pay on time, but for whatever reason haven't this time. So forecasting is showing a real gap between the leaders and the laggers. And the second area is in back office processing, where it's ripe for process and task automation. And the leaders are starting to move beyond 1 to 10 bots to really starting to deploy 50, 80, 100. And what are some of the characteristics of the automation that we see in the leaders? I've talked a little bit about machine learning and some of the more AI and language-based automation that we see in some of the leaders, but there's two characteristics that I think really describe what an advanced set of automation can mean, and wanted to bring that to life for you all in finance functions to understand what that could look like. The first is personalization. And we all know that personalization has a much better impact when communicating any information to another party. And from a finance perspective, there's a couple of great ways intelligent automation can now help with that personalization. One of those on the bottom right, you can see here, is personalized query management. So when we're thinking about a supplier that we might be working with, really tailoring automated communications to that supplier about when they're going to get paid, what discounts might have been applied, how much you expect to buy from them in the future, and using that in a much lower effort way to build a really strong relationship with suppliers. And contextualization, so that's really bringing together multiple pieces of information to help illustrate the point that you're trying to make. So a great example of that might be getting actionable financial recommendations using machine learning. So an example of that could be taking account of a change in an exchange rate in one part of your business, which might mean that actually the margins are going to be lower on a product than normal, and therefore you might want to focus marketing spend in another part of your business to have a better impact on margins. And machine learning can allow you to extract, review, and make a decision on that information with a lot more speed and accuracy than a human could. And a final characteristic, I think, is gamification, where we're seeing that particularly in finance, where it's often quite challenging, complex numbers you're trying to explain and engender action around the organization and other functions. By adding some gamification into how you're communicating that information and the actions you want people to take, you can get a much better impact from the organization in taking action on those numbers. So what does all of that mean for finance? And if you get all of that right, what benefit could that bring to you in finance functions? There's four main things that I always come back to. One is speed. Technology does not take breaks. It doesn't go on holiday. It doesn't get sick. The volumes you can put through it 24 hours a day are up to 10 times greater than anything that a human could do. There's an improvement in cost efficiency. Even if you have offshore operations, you're still going to see significant savings if you're using bots and machine learning tools to perform your finance tasks. So there's still a massive cost opportunity to go for here. There's a time-saving opportunity. It's taking away some of the effort of the low-risk, repeated, low impact decisions, where actually you don't necessarily need somebody to look at it every month. You just need to know that it's happening. And finally, reducing risk. We talked about the controllership area earlier, and the opportunity to spot risks you may not even know were there before they become issues means that automation isn't just a cost-saving activity. It can be a great way to reduce risk and create capacity for your teams. So I hope that's helped paint the picture a little bit of some of the opportunities that are there. I'm going to talk a little bit now about one of our clients, which is a global manufacturing business who saw the potential for automation and decided to launch a machine learning pilot. So why were they setting off on this machine learning journey? For this organization, inventory costs are huge, as with many of you, I'm sure, on the call, if you're in high volume organizations. So optimizing inventory is a massive driver, business driver for them. They also needed to be able to better forecast demand, to really understand what demand they were going to expect to see from customers in different geographies for different product lines. They needed to be able to do that over an up to 9-month time horizon to allow them to get the right stock from the right places into the right sites to be able to fulfill that demand, and to know whether they should make or buy products as well. And ultimately their aim was to optimize production costs and also inventory costs, to be able to hold less stock and have less transport costs and things by having it in the right locations. So they decided to look at machine learning as a tool to help them solve those problems. In this particular example, they decided to use a machine learning capability sitting on top of their OneStream EPM platform. To describe a little bit about what is machine learning and how does it work, we wanted to describe it in these 3 simple terms. So building the tool, and you start off with inputting obviously clean historic data. For this particular client, that was about 6 years worth of data history. Then you want to start to auto-generate and inform features and events. So what we mean by that are variables which would affect the model and accuracy of forecasts. So things like holiday periods, planned downtime periods, COVID disruptions, anything that might disrupt the normal pattern of demand and supply. And then you start to train the models. So you're starting to teach the models as you run and rerun the model and pop out the forecast. You start to teach it which one is most accurate, so it can learn as you go and use different examples to start to help it to identify the most accurate path forwards. And I should say, with this particular client, they chose one business unit to reduce the variables a little bit to allow them to really get their arms around the accuracy of the forecast. So they continuously, over a period of months, utilize that model, refining the parameters that were being fed into it. And ultimately, out of the machine learning forecast, their goal is to be able to efficiently create those forecasts, not just in that pilot business unit, but across the business, to be able to use that to do planning, purchasing, even for CapEx planning, to work out how many factories they might need in different locations versus how much they might source from elsewhere. And ultimately to use those model results in how they manage performance across the business. So just a little bit more detail then on the mechanics of how that looked. If you see on the left-hand side, I talked about the source data. So for this particular example, it was about 500 different parts that they were analysing, and every combination of ship to destinations of those parts, plus also obviously which parts they had sourced in some cases from external providers. They brought in 6 years of history because it needed to have enough depth to iron out the nuances of different years. And then, as I talked about earlier, started to feed in the features and indicators. So started to identify, in this case, things like Polish holidays where they had significant manufacturing sites, and things like COVID shutdowns or periods where they knew the customers had shutdowns. They built the model and configured it and started to refine those features by selecting the ones which were most appropriate as they ran through the scenarios again and again through what we call the model arena. And then started to look at how they were going to utilize the information coming out of it and populating it into other systems. What they started to see is that actually on the demand forecast and be able to predict customer demand, there was lower bias, which was great. So actually the model started to be able to be more accurate in terms of understanding where there might be customer demand. There were a few issues of things like where an individual happened to know there was a big shipment that was going to come in. So they had to find ways to try and allow the technology to have the same information as a human would in order to be able to plan for inventory holding versus demand. And ultimately, as I said before, the goal is then to create the output information in the form of dashboards, in the form of reports that the business could then use for planning. So what did they see with the results of the pilot so far? What you can see on the graph in the dark blue line is the actual results of the period that they were evaluating. So you can see the actual level of inventory that was required. In the orangey gold, you can see the output of the machine learning forecast. So actually it's the closest line to the dark blue actuals that were seen over the period they evaluated. And then in the light blue and grey lines are the human version of EDI, of the demand forecast that was produced by individuals, with the grey line being an adjusted output where an individual had gone through and had their best guess at what the forecast would be. So ultimately what they found is they've got up to a 7% improvement against the human adjusted forecast. So the machine learning tool had managed to produce a 7% improvement. And if you turn that into a 7% reduction of inventory being held, you're looking at a very significant financial number. So it's given them a really great base to start from, and they're really excited about what this could mean for the business. What are the benefits they're hoping to get? I've talked about some of them already, but transparency, everybody getting the same set of information based off the same data set. So creating consensus-based demand planning rather than it just being within an individual, within one team. Efficiency in producing the forecast much faster at the click of a button, and to be able to standardize things like the horizons over which forecasts were produced. It can be adapted very easily, so you can add in new variables or make changes to the features that we talked about earlier. It's predictable and more accurate. So over time, the goal is to aim at 10 to 15% accuracy improvement. As I say, at the minute, they're at 7%. And ultimately, reduction in costs, as we've described before, things like holding costs, freight costs, and inventory costs. And bringing together data science with business planning, truly actually using some of the power of this technology to really enrich business planning. What's the future look like? So you can see on the slide here, the adoption curve this client has been through. Where they're at today is this seeding, and they're starting to seed their real planning processes across the whole business with the machine learning forecasts, and then allowing people to make adjustments to that. In the future, they're hoping they can go even further and genuinely use the machine learning forecast as the source of the truth for planning. So I hope that's been useful as a little snapshot of what the future could look like for you. And now I'm going to hand over to Georgia, who's going to talk to us a little bit about hotspots for finance automation.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good afternoon to all the participants. I'm Georgia Adams. I'm the Intelligent Automation Customer Lead for Illumi, and I'm excited today to share with you some practical examples where we can apply digital solutions in the finance function. CFOs are increasingly experiencing external pressures to invest in digital solutions. They not only have to invest in them, they have to understand them, they have to prioritize them, and they also need to eventually report on the return on investment. The 4 areas of focus where digital solutions can substantially contribute to an organization include increasing the competitive advantage of an organization as new market entrants cause disruption. Organizations are required to respond far more rapidly, far more creatively and innovatively, and also deliver with a high quality of service. Technology can also support changing customer demands. As Charlotte has shown, we have technology that can support you in predicting trends, changing patterns of customer behavior, and to stay on top of the curve with your customer demands. It's important that you are using technology to predict that kind of behavior. With cost pressures, our technology, as Charlotte has shown, definitely we've got technologies that can support with reducing costs, even with detection of fraud. That's certainly a cost saving. But also the technology does also free up capacity such that it's no longer necessary to employ new resources to do the work that can be done by the automation. We've also seen at clients how we have reworked some of their processes, and just in reworking the process or introducing technologies, we've been able to also reduce costs. Technologies also serve as great protectors of the organization's reputational reputation, and also prevents any regulatory risks. I always joke about how the bots are the most ideal workers because they don't cheat, they don't lie, and they don't steal. So they're also great with detecting fraud, as I've said. What I'd like to also just present is I want to present the potential opportunities that are available in the finance function. Of course, there are many possibilities or candidate cases across the organization, but these in particular are centered around the finance function. Across all the finance processes available, from procurement to reporting, planning and accounting, we've listed several hotspots. We call them hotspots because they are typical cases that we find, typical use cases we find in in all organizations, and they're primarily ideal candidate cases because they are high volume based in transactions, and also they're relatively repetitive and mundane in nature. I'm not going to go through all of these opportunities, but it is very helpful to see the list because it allows you to start seeing where the applications may exist in your organization, and it really does give you the art of the possible, and starts it starts giving you an idea of what is possible that you may not have thought is possible to automate or rework. Some transactional kind of processes that can be processed with regular robotic process automation are, let's just give examples, are any type of reconciliations, say in the management accounting, recons and consolidations, intercompany transactions are excellent candidate cases, and any also journal entries and Also, here's a good one, is vendor administration and onboarding. That's typically required in all organizations. It's very administrative, and it really also helps improve supplier relationships when we are performing that in a very smooth and efficient manner. Some algorithmic processes that require machine learning and artificial intelligence, they typically lie in some examples such as client master data. A lot of organizations, you'll often hear it that they have bad data or they need to clean up the data. Our machine learning applications are really great at sifting through data, finding patterns of outlying and outliers and anomalies in data. So all of these master data discrepancies, master data maintenance, these are really good cases for machine learning and artificial intelligence applications. Finally, because we have all these technologies available, the CFO also needs to be able to decide and prioritize which processes are really worth investing in. With all the choices available, we thought it's really a useful tool to compare value of a solution against complexity of a solution. So those that are high in value and high in complexity are going to be the strategic ones They may yield a great value, but are not going to be the quick wins are the ones that are high value and low complexity, and we can tackle relatively quickly until we move into the strategic and tackle these ones. Just to go through a few, the light green ones are indicative of the finance processes. So you will see strategic processes that are ideal to automate include operational finance and accounting, financial report aggregation, financial risk assessments. Some of the financial processes sitting in the low complexity are payroll processing, for example, or invoice processing. In the risk, the dark green bullets represent the processes in the risk and compliance function. And you'll see again a strategic complexity, a strategic process to automate would be something like customer due diligence. Very important to a company, and even another example, licensing and registration. A little bit lower in complexity, so a quick win would be regulatory compliance, screening and risk management. And that's just to give you an idea of how to prioritize the investment in these solutions. Any processes that may fit on the or land on the border here between quick wins and debatable really depend on the volumes of transactions that one is processing. So the higher the volumes of transactions or the data that is being processed, the higher the returns on investment, because that's just the number of transactions. It returns higher returns on the investment. I think that from my side, I hope that's given you some idea on an understanding of the different types of processes, what is possible in your arena, and also how to prioritize some of these solutions. I'm going to hand over to Mahal to take you through what the next steps are.
Thank you, Georgia. I think those were good insights. When you think about what is possible, it's always good to have a kind of a bird's eye view and see what's possible from start to finish. And I think while you have that in your mind, it's good for us to then move on. Actually, how do you start with your digital automation journey? And maybe for those that have started, how do you scale? Now, 70% of digital transformation or practices or journeys actually end up with failure. Now, it's a bit of a hard and serious way to start this section, but it's quite important that you know that a lot of people are giving this a try and a lot of people are failing at it. And we're going to spend the next couple of minutes to actually just talk about how to put your mindset, what to think about before you start the journey, or if you have started with the journey, what to actually look to put in place that will position you to actually succeed in this journey. Now, there are three key things for you to think about. I think we can talk about strategy, we can talk about an operating model, or we can even talk about kind of goals and objectives, but it's important for you to understand that there are three components that will make up whether your journey is a success or not. And these three things revolve around people, process, and technology. Now, why people? I think people speak to who, right? It speaks to the who in the organization, who does the work, who's doing this, who are the people of importance, and who are actually the people moving or doing what you're currently working on and looking to digitalize. So it's quite important for you to think about them as key components to your in your digitalization strategy. Now we're going to move to process, and process speaks to what, as in what is actually being done. And it's quite important for you to understand, after you know who's doing it, you need to understand what they're doing throughout the organization, throughout your finance space, and think about how things are working and what is the current ways of working, the as-is processes, so you can now look to digitalize and look to transform. And the last part is technology, and this closes the loop with how. because now you know who's doing it and what they're doing. The technology speaks to the how they're doing it, and it's quite important for you to know what's in your landscape, what's out there, and what can you leverage to actually start and kick off this digitalization journey or even scale it. Now, we actually subscribe to one of robotic operating model that was actually brought about by Blue Prism, who are one of our partners. And it actually speaks to how to actually put down the execution plan. And we are going to go through it in quite high level, but I think it will give you an idea of what to actually think about and how to put things, what pillars and what kind of focus you need to have and put in place to kick off your journey and to actually scale. So the first thing is strategy. It's quite important, and I mean, we are here and we're speaking to organizations because there has been a strategy before. You are here because you followed a strategy and it has either been successful or not, but ultimately it has moved you from where you are to where you are now, which is why it's important for you to put a blueprint down, right? Think about what the future looks like. Think about how you need to work in the future and kind of work backwards from there to say, how do I get there? And it's quite important for you to think about the business case around moving from where you are to where you want to be. This is where you will also think about the governance and controls and the risk surrounding where the digitalization strategy and the journey that you want to take. You'll also put together architecture and technology, and this is where RPA technologies come in. This is where OCR, machine learning technologies that Charlotte and has spoken about earlier come in to say, how can we leverage all of these things to actually get us to where we want to be? Now, secondly is workforce. Once you have the strategy in place and you know where you want to be, you need to think about the people that are currently doing what you're currently doing. It's quite important, and how you're going to upskill those people and bring them along the journey and actually enable them to make the journey possible. And this is where you'll be building, the organizational model on change management, on how to upskill the people, on how to change the mindset, and have people thinking in a digitalized manner on the new ways of working, adopting new ways of thinking and working, educating, upskilling your workforce, onboarding and training digital workers. I think the biggest change has been that technology, and I think with RPA is it's different from most technologies in the sense that it's actually not a tool that you use, but rather it's a tool that works as a co-worker. It's a tool that works just like your colleague works. And it's quite important for you to note that, when you bring a new person in the organization, that person goes through an onboarding process and goes through a training process. And you don't need to do that with RPA to a certain degree, but you need to know that it creates disruption and can create disruption. And it's important that people know how to work with these tools and how to actually leverage them to the best of their abilities. And then these policies and standards. And this is where it's important for you to understand where your business is and what people are doing and where the segregations of duties are, as an example, so that you maintain, you don't create risk by introducing automation. Then we move to design. And I think this actually touches quite nicely with what Georgia has actually been putting together. And you think about the automation opportunities and the hotspots around finance, around from procurement all the way to budgeting and forecasting, and you think about what's possible, what are we currently doing, what are the processes that are within the organization, and what are the processes that we actually not even doing, and think about how we can automate that or introduce them in organization. This is where you actually think about the future, align them to the strategy, and know that you're going to identify them, you're going to prioritize them, and you're going to actually put down an approach on how to get there and put all these processes in perspective. Then we're going to move to development, and this is kind of a bit of a gray area for those that are new to digitalization, right? It's about how are we going to develop this? How are we actually? This is different. It's not I have a programming house or I have a programming department or development department that are upskilling on our tools, or that are constantly upgrading the systems that we're working on. But now comes automation. How are we going to develop on this? And it's quite easy, and it's actually important that you put a methodology in place. Have the team and have a roadmap on how you're going to manage the new automations that are now coming into your space. How are you going to take business through the journey, remembering the three key components of people, process, and technology? How you need to keep those three in the loop when you're going through your development life cycle, how you putting down your delivery controls on bringing through business along the journey and educating them on how things are going to be working, how things will not be working, what they need to let go of, and what they actually need to take up. And it's quite important to also think about how you're going to test and quality control the processes. Now, we do this a lot consistently, and it's quite important to know that you need to continue this. When an automation comes in, it's important for you to test and continuously do quality assurance on its outcomes, on the way it processes, on how to optimize it. Because the same way you're actually working with your coworker and you're finding new ways and better ways of doing work is the same way that you will actually get new optimizations and better delivery outcomes with automations. And it's quite important for you to go through that journey. Then you're going to have security and access. And this is where it's a bit of a touch scenario, because you have a cold body, right? You don't have a human that's seated, and you can actually look at this person and know that this person is not accessing, sensitive information. With automations, I think Georgia mentioned that they are very honest and they will do what they're programmed to do. And I think that's the beauty of it, right? You actually can be rest assured that the security controls that have been put in the automations will remain, and those will be followed consistently. And that's why it's important for you to actually think about the security portion. How do I put in security and build in security within my automations to make sure that my business is protected, or to make sure that I do not expose my business to any unnecessary risk? Then lastly is operations, and this speaks to life after development. We've gone through this journey of putting a strategy together of upskilling our employees and making sure that they are ready for automation, and identifying processes and ultimately developing on those processes and then testing them and having business vet the outcomes and know that this is working as it should. Now, how does it work? How does it then get realized within the business, and we start seeing the benefits? And this is where you need to think about your deploying and your release strategies. How am I going to deploy these into the business? This is where you put the plan together. This is where you think about how do you maintain the releases? How do you continuously grow the capability of the automations? This is where change control is quite important. How has the automation changed? There are rules that are changing, processes are changing, requirements are changing ever so consistently. And it's important for you to know that the automation that you've built a year ago, could, be kind of, how can I put it? It could be quite susceptible to the changes in the environment or the changes into the way the business is done. And it's quite important for you to put a change control mechanism in place for you to be able to go back to those automations and be able to change them, to realign them to how the business is doing, or what the change requirements look like. And don't be afraid of that. Then the workforce management and optimization. This actually touches on what I said with the change control. There's continuous optimizations that need to happen in this phase. It's not something that's a box that has been built and we let go. You consistently look at the outcomes. You consistently look to optimize and get better value. And these are the plans that you need to think about and plan and put together around your operations to see what are the key controls we can put to actually continuously monitor and optimize our automations. And then lastly, it's the support model, right? Automations will need to be supported. Just like with every other technology, there's maintenance that happens. And not only that, but business will need to be supported as well, right? I think it's important that you don't put technology in front of business and move away. So go through the journey of thinking about, how do I consistently keep the feedback loop with business to kind of enrich the experience first and foremost, and also the benefit, and just keep scaling and improving and introducing better and more efficient automations in the business. Now, I think it's a good picture that we have, right? That, you know, you have a picture of what automations to actually look out for, what are the best cases from a strategic perspective, and what are the quick wins. And now you have an idea of, you know, putting down a strategy that will include your people, your process, and the technology within the business, and also outside, on kind of going through this digitalization journey. But it's quite important for us to actually take a step back and say, let's embrace the journey, right? It's you shouldn't attempt to run before you can walk, right? You shouldn't attempt to walk before you can crawl. And it's important for you to think about, how do I take my organization, no matter where it is, from being aware to actually being a visionary within the digitalization space, right? Because the first thing is, you need to prepare for automation. And it's important to go back to the three components and know, how am I preparing for my organization? Am I taking my people along the journey? Am I upskilling my people on what we are looking to do? Am I looking at my processes and reimagining how they should work, or optimizing them before we can automate them? You know, are my technologies that we have in-house, are they sufficient? Do we need to bring on more technologies to help facilitate the automation journey? These are the key concerns that you need to look at in an aware stage. And this is where you actually start thinking about preparing the organization for automation. You need to go through this journey. And once you have these key constructs in place, you then move from actually starting to deliver on automations, right? Because once you have the technology in place, once your people are onboarded on the journey, and once you have the processes ready for automations, this is where you can start automating and start realizing journey, and looking at pilots, and looking at effectively taking the first chunk of looking at a department as an example, to what you know, Charlotte mentioned before with one of our clients. They actually looked at one department and said, okay, this is where we want to implement machine learning and see if we can see the benefits, or we can realize the benefits. And this is effectively where you are active and you are starting to actually implement. And the next phase would be operational, because once you implement 2-3 automations, you are now in a position to you know, put together 5, 10. And this is where the model comes in, to say, once you have the strategy in place, once you have the model put down together, you can now start, you actually are ready to go from the maturity level of introducing automation to enriching the organization by actually, you know, continuously building on automation and introducing automations. And lastly, you know, I think going to, from a scale perspective, to say, now that the business is actually realizing automations, how do I expand this across the organization? How do I move from one department, or how do I move from one team to the rest of the organization, or to the larger team, to the larger pillars within the organization, to actually scale my automations? And lastly, visionary. And I think this is where we all want to be. You know, I think this is where you will be if you follow the right steps, if you grow organically in your maturity of automation, to say, we have all these automations and they are working, and people are coexisting with RPA. How do I look back at the now available information and the now available ways of working, to say, what can we change? You know, what can we introduce into our business to you know, to elevate what we deliver? And this is where you will be, and we don't have an answer to that. So I think lastly, I'll give over to Stan, who will kind of take over what we deliver as in Lumi, and the journey, and how we facilitate the journey. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Stan. I'm leading in Lumi automation practices for Europe and Middle East. Many thanks for taking your time to join us today, and sincerely, I hope you find something useful out of it. Finalizing our session today, I would like to emphasize a few key points on how in Lumi and our team can assist you in your perfect finance automation journey. In Lumi's intelligent process management and automation offering goes far beyond just robotic process automation. We believe that there is a process behind everything a company does. However, concealed variables and inefficiencies are slowly killing the productivity and hinders the opportunity to scale. With that in mind, we are providing the unique connected business process management, process intelligence, and process automation approach to realize the potential of innovating technologies and transform into the tangible results for the business. Everything starts with core engine of the business process management to design, orchestrate, monitor, and more important, get control over the processes. Subsequently, process intelligence tools allow you to X-ray any operation or job task and analyze how your business runs. That helps not only to unfold inefficiencies, provide the powerful instruments to eliminate different pain points, but also helps to identify the ideal candidates for automation. Having a crystal clear understanding around the process and operations, it's possible to reveal the potential to scale, digitalize, and transform your finance operations. Like a cherry on the cake, intelligent automation tools combine power of digital workforce to take over the routine, helping people and employees to concentrate on revenue-driven activities only they can do. Whether you need advisory or implementation of new automation technologies, in Lumi can actually support any and all the stages of application development and usage life cycle. Many years we help our customers to build requirements and business case around IT projects, select technologies, augment the resources, deliver and implement, optimize processes, and deliver the real business change for different operations. Important to mention that we also help customers to onboard digital workforce that is cognitive, have abilities to think, read, take decisions by consuming AI, ML, and NLP components into the automation scenarios. Reading, copying data, aggregating data, recognizing voice or text, enhancing Internet of Things with the capabilities of predictive maintenance or process sensors data, that's all become possible within Lumi. And we partner with leading technology vendors like Blue Prism, UiPath, Kofax, Celonis, and QPR Software to provide our customers the best mix of cutting-edge technologies based on your particular requirements, company needs, and available budgets. I want to thank you again, and we will be happy to engage with you to explore more around potential automation journeys for your finance function, as well as to share our broad expertise in this area. Please feel free to contact us if you would like to learn more. Best regards in Lumi Dream Team.